civil rights generation is starting to be called home. Leaders are leaving us. We in the CBC have lost a lot of greats. And I can't forget the promise I made to John Lewis, with all that he gave me, with all that he gave his country, that I said we would make him proud. And so this is one of those moments that John Lewis, he would not be sitting still. He would be calling me up and say, "You still got that Facebook thing?" I go, "No, I don't really use Facebook anymore." But there's a thing called TikTok, or I don't know what John Lewis would say right now. I know what he said in 2017, but I'll be honest with you, I don't know what he would say. But John Lewis would say something. He would do something. He wouldn't treat this moral moment like it was normal. John Lewis knew what King said, that what we have to repent for, all of us here will have to repent for, is not just the vitriolic words and violent actions of so-called bad people. What we will have to repent for in our day and age is the appalling silence and the inaction of good people. This is our moral moment. This is when the most precious ideas of our country are being tested, where the Constitution, and the question is being called, where does the Constitution live? On paper or in our hearts? This is the moment. Generations get them. We're on a crossroads here, folks. Healthcare is on the balance. Veterans are on the balance. Priorities are on the balance. Where's our priorities, America? More tax cuts disproportionately going to the wealthy? Greater budget deficits in the trillions and trillions of dollars? Or are we going to do something different like John Lewis would call us to do? He would call us to get into good trouble, necessary trouble, save the soul of America. But you all know John. Don't hate each other. Don't let anybody pull you so low as to hate them. I said this about the presiding elder. Different parties, but he showed me an act of kindness during this speech. He and I have talked about energy policy. He has amazing ideas. I want to partner with him. Don't hate anybody. Did the folks in Birmingham, did Martin Luther King, Fred Shuttlesworth, Dorothea Cotton, James Bevel, did they bring bigger dogs and bigger fire hoses to match the sheriff's? Bull Connor, thank you. I've been standing here a long time. They didn't do that. They were creative artists of activism. They called to the conscience of a country. They challenged our moral imagination, not to focus on hate, but focus on what is possible in America if we redeem the dream, if we dream America anew. That generation in their 20s and 30s, that's what they demanded. Martin Luther King didn't go to the March on Washington with a list of grievances against the racists in our country. He went there and called to the conscience of a country. He said he had a dream. That's what we need in our generation. Vision now. That's what we need in our generation. A vision to redeem the dream, to call our country together. Yes, there is a man in the White House who's the most powerful man in the land, and his partner is the richest man in the world. But as long as this is a democracy, that we can still protect the power of the people is greater than the people in power if they use their power. As a great African-American woman author once said, the most common way people give up their power is not realizing they have it in the first place. I've been calling out names, folks, to tell them they have power. I read the stories of Deanna, of Wendy and Cassie, of Tanya, of Cameron, of Jean, of Susan, of Edna, of Randy, of Dylan, of Teresa, of Pamela, of Sally, of Mike, of Carol, of Rosemary, of Danielle, of Judith, of Elizabeth, of Sandra, Alicia, Maggie, Nibel, Laura, Michael, Robin, Mary, Allison, Ash, Roseanne, Carrie, Samantha P., Raphael, Will, Anthony, Sean, and so many more. I read their stories here because while we were elected, they are the power of our country. I've made mistakes. We all have. Both parties have a lot of mistakes to account for. The ballast of this country, what will anchor us to our ideals, what will call us to new heights, lift our heads, lift our hopes, what will call us to rise is each other. We need each other. We need a greater love in this country. We need a greater fight in this country. We need a greater determination. We can't act as if this is normal times. These people's stories that I wrote were calling out for help. Senator, help me. Someone help me. I'm in danger of losing my health care. Someone help me. I'm a veteran. Look what happened to me. It's not fair. I fought for this country. Help me, help me. I'm worried about my Social Security. And the rural office I go to is being closed. Help. People calling out for help. And what Americans do when people are calling out for help? They built an infrastructure. The greatest project ever, called it the Underground Railroad, where Quakers, white folks, joined with black folks to shuttle people to freedom. What did they do when people were worried and fearful? They called people together from across our country. Let's have a conference. Let's go to Seneca Falls. What did they do when they faced violence? Well, look at the people at Stonewall who stood up, who pushed back, who organized, who won. What do they do when the dogs are unleashed on us, the fire hose are unleashed on us? Look at what they did in Selma. I'm getting close to a record, folks, but there's a room here in the Senate named after Strom Thurmond. To hate him was wrong. And maybe my ego got too caught up that if I stood here, maybe, just maybe I could break this record of the man who tried to stop the rights upon which I stand. I'm not here, though, because of his speech. I'm here despite his speech. I'm here because as powerful as he was, the people were more powerful. But I remind you, all those people who believe like me that we've got to redeem the dream, turn again to John Lewis, because you all know the story, my colleagues, of when the man that beat him savagely, drew blood, cracked bones. Decades later, he was a congressman. That man brought his grandson with him to ask for forgiveness from John Lewis. I heard about this story when I was in the car in Georgia with him. What did you do, John? This man that so viciously beat you, wounded you, bruised you, battered you. What did you do when he came to ask you for forgiveness? What did you do? And a good Christian man of faith, simply said, every one of us needs mercy. Every one of us needs redemption. I forgave him. I hugged him. We wept. And I looked at the boy. This nation needs you too. John?
Would the senator yield for a question?
Chuck Schumer, it's the only time in my life I can tell you no.
I just want to tell you a question. Do you know you have just broken the record? Do you know how proud this caucus is of you? Do you know how proud America is of you?
Ladies and gentlemen,
Ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen. Order. Order. The chair does not wish to take away from this moment, but I think the best way to honor this great accomplishment to our guests in the gallery, to make a rare exception and let you stand to show your appreciation, I will not constrain my fellow senators.
Thank you. Chuck Schumer, I have yielded for a question, and you asked me, did I know? I know now. I want to not quite wrap this up yet. I don't want to wrap this up yet. My mom's senator, my mom's been watching. I know Catherine Cortez Masto has a podium in front of her. She can give me a rest. I'd like to go a little further if we can, just a little further. I love, and again, I know people are trying to train each other, and all of our media operations, they give the worst images of the people of the other party. But I want to tell you, one of the funny tweets my staff gave me is something Ted Cruz said. He's around 19, 20 hours, he said, maybe I should pull a fire alarm. He's going to break my record. I'm going to pause in a moment if she has a question for me to Catherine Cortez Masto, because she's my mother. But I do want to just say again, 2 points to make if I can. One is how grateful I am to my staff. When we decided to do this many days ago, they were like, we have to do this. And we started preparing and working on this, and they did an extraordinary job. They were with me late nights, writing. I just feel guilty because they wrote about 10 books, and we didn't use all of them. They were really substantive stuff, pulling from Republicans and Democrats in critique of this moment, pulling from Democrats and Republicans, Republican governors that were saying, do not cut Medicaid. States that know, as my colleagues do, that have a trigger, that if the Medicaid funding goes below 90%, they stop the Medicaid expansion. My staff really worked hard to not make this just Democratic voices, to make it people in our country, that Republicans and Democrats, you heard mentioned in the speech, the Cato Institute, the Manhattan Institute, all people who are honest arbiters and are saying that what Trump is doing is wrong, that a budget like this that blows massive holes in our deficit, it will be something our children are trying to pay for. And what are they ultimately paying for that's caused this big deficit? It's trillions of dollars of tax cuts that people like Doge, multi-billionaire Musk will benefit from, but children won't. They did such a good job bringing together authorities on both sides of the aisle. I just want to thank them. I want to thank my cousin Pam and my family. Cousin Pam, like Chris Murphy, was here for the whole time. I want to thank Chris Murphy again. Who never stopped telling me we could do this, we can do this, we can do this, and said, I will stay with you. He's been with me on the floor. I hope you don't look as tired as I look, because you look beat, man. Do I look that bad? No. All right. I want to go a little bit past this, and then I'm gonna deal with some of the biological urgencies I'm feeling. But I'm going to wait here because I have the power, I have the floor. Somebody has to ask me, perhaps from my mom's state, the way that's supposed to work.
So will the good senator from New Jersey yield for a question?
My mom would be so upset with me, my Aunt Marilyn, my Uncle Butch, my Aunt Shirley, all the people that are your constituents, not mine. They would be upset with me if I didn't yield to you for a question while retaining the floor.
Well, first of all, Senator Booker, I have to say, we in Nevada are so proud of you. We are proud to be Nevada Strong. You are one of us. You are definitely New Jersey, Nevada Strong, and so proud of what you have accomplished so far, and willing to stay here as long as it takes to help you get your message across. And I think that's the important moment. We are all here right now. So I want to I want to pose a question to you, actually a couple questions, but I want to start off and set the stage here, because you have been here now, for over 24 hours. You are missing some of the national news, things that are happening out there. But one of the things I want to point to that is happening that you may not be aware of, and you've touched on it a little earlier today, is this notion that we have now a president who is actually focused on billionaires and tax cuts for billionaires at the expense of the American public. And one of the things we have watched him do is cut funding for medical research. Now, what you may not know is just today I found out that HHS laid off the entire healthy aging branch of the CDC, just today. This office administers Alzheimer's disease programs.
Yes.
And it oversees the funding from the Bold Infrastructure for Alzheimer's Act, and it is a piece of legislation that I was so proud to partner with Susan Collins on. And she has fought for, and we have fought for, funding for it to support caregivers and their families. And Congress just reauthorized this funding. And now we have a president that has stopped the critical work that scientists are doing to try and cure Alzheimer's. And I bring this to your attention, Senator, because like you, and I think like all of us, there are personal moments in the work that we do. My personal moment is my grandmother, who I'm named after, died from Alzheimer's. And she died at a time in Las Vegas when there was not enough research, when there was not enough health care, when there were really not enough providers to understand what was going on. And so for many of us, this fight, not only is it personal, but we recognize the impact that it has outside the Beltway in so many families and lives across the country. And that's what this is about. In Nevada, as of 2023, there are 49,000 people, 65 and older, are living with Alzheimer's. And that's projected to reach 65,000 this year. Not only did we hear that HHS laid off the entire healthy aging branch of the CDC, but Donald Trump also recently terminated a $14,000 NIH research grant that had been supporting Alzheimer's research at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And he's continued to cut the grant for essential research for so many reasons. We've seen these funding cuts, we've seen mass layoffs, and the impoundment of grants that have already been approved by Congress. This is a violation of the rule of law, and you have been talking about that for the last couple of hours. President Trump is forgetting that this is personal. It is happening to so many families. So my question, Senator Booker, to you is, what do you think families and caregivers of those impacted by Alzheimer's, how they are feeling about what is happening right now?
So this bothers me for two reasons, and the first you've already mentioned, is this is the points of bipartisan work that we do. I talked about Chris Murphy and the bipartisan gun bill that lots of people here worked on with Senator Cornyn and others, and how upset my state is that some of that community violence intervention money that I worked so hard to get in that bill is being clawed back by a president. There are people in this room, I know so many of you, and I know on the other side, that have done such great work to work with our colleagues to find common ground and get really important programs passed that bring resources to families. And it's being clawed back by a president, not with consultation, not with a hearing, not with a discussion of even why you would target Alzheimer's research. That is a violation of the separation of powers. And I wish my Republican colleagues would hold more hearings about that. These are programs that they like. I saw that with USAID. I worked with Marco Rubio on some of that programs and those investments that are now been cut and clawed back. So it's a separation of powers issues. It's an offense to the common goals that we share in this community of leaders. But the second reason it bothers me is an article I read hours ago by Fareed Zakaria. And he talked about what's happening to a nation that cuts so dramatically what is one of the best taxpayer investment dollars in biomedical sciences. If you're an investor, and I told you there's an investment that every dollar you invest, you would get $5 back for your economy, folks would be invested in that vehicle. Well, that's NIH funding. Every dollar you invest, who would cut a profit center? It's not just a profit center, though. The outcomes, the discoveries, could change the lives of people who are suffering in your nation and around the world. But he's attacking them. I read all these universities from around the country. This shows you how magnanimous I'm trying to be. I even read stories from USC. I'm sorry, rival. That all of these universities are cutting their postdocs, cutting their PhDs, cutting the lending, because they don't know, as Donald Trump threatens, the direct costs they're stopping. And Fareed Zakaria said so painfully to all Americans with Americans' pride, as we are doing that, China, who, when they had that cultural revolution, they first went after their universities. Now, modern China, their government is doing the opposite. They're trying to out-America us. They're massively increasing their investments in scientific research because they know if they get ahead of us on quantum computing, all of our subs can be located, and God knows what could happen. They could, any kind of cryptology they could break. They know if they get ahead of us on scientific research, the power and advantage it will give them, so they're doubling down. But what are we doing in America? We're tolerating a president that is cutting the funding that will predict who defines the future and what values will define those futures. Will they be democratic values, or will it be the values of the country that's competing with us to beat us, and right now we're giving them a head start? And then the final reason that question bothers me is because my father died of Parkinson's, and he had Parkinson's-related dementia. And I know what that's like. I know the pain families are enduring. I remember the time that my dad and my mom, we were in the movie theater, and my mother just shook my world. She was in Georgia. And so many people here in this room have had the same experience. We're in a movie theater, and my mom leans over to me and said, "You need to take your dad to the bathroom." I never imagined the years of my dad as a 2-year-old and 3-year-old taking me to the bathroom, that one day I'd have to take him. And so in this Atlanta movie theater, in the middle of a movie, which I was like, okay, it's time for me to do this ritual that so many families know. I pick my dad up, who's shuffling with his Parkinson's. I'm not seeing any light in his eyes that he's there. I'm just letting him hold me, and he's shuffling into the bathroom. And then we get to a public bathroom. His hands are shaking. He's standing in front of the urinal, and then I realize I got to unbuckle this man's pants. So many families know this, and my ego, I'm sorry, I was leaning over and I'm saying, wait a minute, I'm in a public bathroom, leaning over, I'm buckling another man's pants. Please, please, God, don't let somebody come in. And as if God heard my call, someone walked in. And I hear the person walk, and I'm like, just please keep walking. Go into a stall, please keep walking. And then suddenly I hear the feet walk past me and stop. And then the man turns around and says, "Oh my God, Cory Booker." And then I look up at my dad, and I see the clarity in his eyes. He is 100% there, and he's grinning and loving my mortified embarrassment. Alzheimer's is devastating so many American families who are watching the loved one of their lives diminish. And we're cutting funding. Donald Trump is cutting funding, democratically, bipartisanly approved. So forget the separation of powers. It's important. It's so important. If that doesn't get you, then maybe think about the competition with China. If that doesn't get you, those two don't get you, America, then think about the millions of Americans struggling with Alzheimer's, the struggles it does to those families. This is a moral moment, America. This is going to define the character of our country for years and years to come. Has the Senate called a hearing on your bipartisan funding, Senator? No. Have we done our oversight responsibility? Have we checked, as I read from the Federalist Papers, as our founders wanted us to do, is to check the executive, be the check at the executive that balances our governmental powers? No, we're not checking that executive. With Signalgate, I have heard from Republicans that serve in Congress, of the 535 with us, I know other colleagues here have heard, they're mortified. You talked about that. Mortified about that. And again, this is not partisan. The Biden administration made foreign policy mistakes. Obama made foreign policy mistakes. Reagan, when I was growing up, I was hearing about the Iran-Contra scandal. So I'm not going to be one of those peoples that the pristine, perfect Democrats. We've made mistakes, we've made failings, we've let the public down. We have some reckoning in our own party that we're working on right now. But that doesn't say that you should just be one of these people that says, well, Biden did it. No, you should be a leader of character that says there's something wrong here, and in fact, it could point to real problems in the national security of our country. And the laws that we established. One of those laws is very simple. You're supposed to preserve records. How can a signal chain that disappears not be a violation of the law of this land? Is there a hearing on that? Head of the Intel Commission, not a hearing at all. Where are the checks and balances spelled out in the Constitution? We are derelicting our duties here in the Senate. We really are. And the consequences of that is the very national security of our country. How many times do you think this was the first time they created a signal chat? Or is this a pattern of practice? You're a really rational man. I keep looking at you, Mark. You're my leader on these issues. Or Jack Reed. No, this indicates a real problem, and the Senate, the United States Senate, should get to the bottom of it. This is a moral moment. I keep saying it's a moral moment. Who are we going to be? What's going to define us? And it's time not for the typical tribalism. It's time for leaders to start standing up and saying, you know what? We can go a different way. We can imagine a different country. That's why I pointed out the new leader of the Democratic Party on the House side. We're a different generation. There's a rising generation of people. I've talked about my friend who wrote this great book, Abundance. There's a whole bunch of new ideas out there that are about the future, about the possibilities, about the hope, about the greatness of America, not the greatness that is braggadocious, not the greatness that says, I'm better than you, not the greatness that says, only I can fix things. That's not the America we want. We want America that says, we the people. An America that says, e pluribus unum. An America says that our history shows that rugged individualism and self-reliance are important values, but rugged individualism didn't beat the Nazis. It didn't take us to the moon. We did that together, America. We need bigger visions that can unite us beyond our narrow partisan divides to get a real mandate. And you know what a real mandate should be? It should be government efficiency. It really should be. God, I have heard from so many of my colleagues on this side of the aisle that have said, if they formed a commission of former executives in this body, I see you, Maggie Hassan, it was hard, but I had to cut 24% of my budget, 1 out of 4 employees. It was really hard, caused a lot of pain, but we had to reduce my government. There are a lot of people here, there are executives on both sides of the aisle that would have said, pick me, let's form the most exciting team possible. Because Jack Reed knows that the military of the United States of America could do things more efficiently. It's a little bit of waste over there, because they haven't passed an audit. Where's Mary Cantwell? The Commerce Committee, so many ideas about how to create profit centers in the American government. You have talked to me about them. You're brilliant on some of these ideas. I look around here, but I could look to the other side of the aisle. The farmer sitting over there, the guy who's been so good to me, Chuck Grassley. I forced that man to hug me when we passed. I forced you to hug me, sir. I have pictures. Can't deny it. I don't know how you're going to get reelected now, sir. You hug this dude, black dude from New Jersey. You're so sweet to me still. We passed a big bipartisan bill because people like him, like the presiding officer, I've met with you, you still have big ideas. You still have big ideas that aren't partisan. If President Trump, from his inaugural address to his first speech before a joint session of Congress, said, enough. There are big ideas in this country. I want the best. I want people to come together. I'm tired of us talking down at each other. It's time for us to come together and imagine ways to create real abundance in America for all Americans. I trust the genius of America, the kindness and the decency, but this president doesn't do that. He violates all of our common senses of decency. And don't say it doesn't happen, folks. Don't say that. I listen to him. I listen to how he talks about people. We have a government now, as I said earlier, that isn't ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. We have a country now where a president says, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for Donald Trump. And you're seeing who gets the special treatment. Some law firms are really threatened right now with being bankrupted by Donald Trump targeting them. Others have decided a different path. I'm not hating on them, but they said, we're going to go to Trump and we're going to offer him what he wants. We're going to give him tens of millions of dollars of free pro bono work. I wish they would bring some of that free pro bono work to Newark, New Jersey. A lot of people who need lawyers, folks in my city. What are the standards here of our government? You want a merger? Well, maybe you should put a lot of money in Donald Trump's meme coin. I read the document, there's something word called emoluments. And we sit by and act like, oh, no big deal. He's made millions and millions of dollars from who we don't know. We haven't held one hearing of oversight to know who is giving him millions of dollars through that meme coin. Is it the Turks? Is it the Saudis? Is it the Chinese? Is it the Russian oligarchs? Do we know? Should we know? Yes, America, stop falling into tribal lanes and closing your eyes to things that should not be normalized. Why are we normalizing these things? They're wrong. They're patently, on the face of it, is wrong. If you use signal to discuss a military attack, the time of the attack, the weapons that are going to be used, and you do it on a commercial app and decide to include a reporter, there should be accountability. Am I crazy?
Order. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just remind you, expressions of approval and disapproval are not permitted by the gallery. Thank you.
He was forced to say that. Look at you, defiant man. The Senate and the House should be checks and balances on the President of the United States. The Senate and the House should not allow business as usual in this moment when the President is insisting that no one has the power to check and balance him. When a judge does it, when a judge decides on the soundness of his legal observations to have a ruling, and then the President of the United States doesn't appeal the ruling like most people kind of do, but starts to drag and insult and threaten that judge with impeachment. And some people, astonishing to me, in our government said, oh, that's right, we should impeach this guy. That's not a question of left or right, that's a question of right or wrong. We're normalizing this behavior. We're letting him do things that Republicans and Democrats should say together are wrong. And so I want to say, I'm going to stop soon.
Well, for a question?
Oh, yes. God bless you. I will yield for a question while retaining the floor.
Thank you. I want to start, before I get to my question, with just saying how proud I am, how proud we all are of you. And I think I'm old enough to remember Strom Thurmond's filibuster. I can remember being in high school and seeing the news every night and the reporters coming from the steps of the Capitol because they were filibustering the Civil Rights Bill. And what I'm proud of is that your focus on democracy and the opportunities that democracy opens up for all of our rights, in my mind, cancels out what Strom Thurmond did to prevent African Americans and others from getting the rights they deserve in this country. So I'm proud of that. But I really want to, you talked earlier this afternoon about the rule of law and the overreach of this administration. And as part of that, you went through a litany of agencies that Congress had established that this president is trying to take away. And I just wanted to point out that, and you mentioned this earlier, one of those agencies that Congress established is the U.S. Agency for International Development. And earlier today, we had a shadow hearing roundtable, the Democrats on the Foreign Relations Committee. It was on the dangerous consequences of funding cuts to U.S. global health programs. And I know that as ranking member on the subcommittee on Africa and global health policy, you would have really been interested in this. I'm glad you were here on the floor, but I wish you could have heard what we heard from the people who testified. We heard from Atul Gawande, who used to be the administrator of USAID, their global health program. We heard from Dan Schwartz, who is the Vice President of Management Sciences for Health, that's a contractor that works on global health programs. And we heard from Nick Enrich, who's the former Assistant Administrator for Global Health at USAID. And they started out by talking about what global health has accomplished through USAID. PEPFAR has saved more than 26 million lives. It's reversed the spread of HIV/AIDS. They've done malaria prevention and control for over 500 million people. They've eradicated smallpox and eliminated most of polio. They've reduced infant mortality by more than 59% since 1990. They've supported cholera, measles, and Ebola outbreak response. And one of the things Dr. Gawande pointed out is that they took the response to Ebola outbreak from 2 weeks. Many of us remember that during the Obama administration when Ebola was coming to the United States. They took that response from 2 weeks down to 24 to 48 hours to be in there to be responding to the Ebola epidemic. And what has this president done? What has Elon Musk and Doge done? They've gone in to USAID. They've cut the global health workforce from over 800 to about 60. They've taken the system that was designed to make programs more efficient, and they dismantled it. And when the Inspector General Paul Martin reported on food rotting in ports, he was fired. USAID has been the largest civilian ground force to address global goals. As Dr. Gawande said, what we learned from USAID is that prevention is a whole lot more efficient and a lot cheaper than emergency treatment. He said that what we spend on global health through USAID has been $9 a household in America in a year. $9. Think about what we've done with that $9. And as they were going through the litany of programs that have been cut, the one that caught my eye was 75% of the pandemic threat comes from diseases jumping from animals to humans. That program has been terminated. 75% of the threat of future pandemics. So, as we think about rule of law and the overreach of this president, would you agree with me that there has been no consultation with Congress about any effort to move USAID into the Department of State, and that because Congress created this agency, Congress has got to be involved in reauthorizing whatever comes next, and that this president and his Doge boys need to understand that before they take any more steps at USAID?
Yes, yes, yes. You and I both know that in a bipartisan way, we created some of these programs principally to keep America safe. Many of us remember that dramatic hearing where Trump's Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, sat before the American people when they were discussing the budgets for USAID and the State Department. And John Mattis knew the power of those programs to keep us safe. You mentioned infectious diseases. Well, we live in a world where an infectious disease anywhere is a threat to public health everywhere. So pulling our scientists out of the fight against Ebola, pulling our scientists out of drug-resistant tuberculosis fights, it makes no sense. And then, in terms of our safety, he just simply said, if you cut these programs, buy me more bullets, because our fight's to spread democracy. There are nations in Africa, for example, where the Chinese are trying to influence a different way of life. That's why so many African countries now won't criticize China for things that the rest of the world say are bad, because they owe them so much debt, they're so engaged, they're so overplaying the fact. Chris Coons said something, I think it was Chris Coons said something painful earlier about Myanmar. This horrific thing. America, the most generous country on the planet, when there's a crisis, we lead the rest. I've sat in meetings in a bipartisan way with ambassadors from other countries where we had the moral authority to tell them, you're not doing enough. And in the Myanmar crisis right now, as Chris Coons said, who's standing there? Not Americans. We don't have the capacity anymore to help in a horrific crisis like that, but the Chinese government's there. Again, it's what defines us. I keep saying this is not a left-right moment. This is a moral moment, and we tell our truth with what we do with our resources. And here's the thing. When you poll people and ask them how much money you spend on USAID, they say, oh, it must be 10% of the American budget. It must be 5% of the American budget. It's around 1% or less. A penny of what tax dollars you send down to Washington goes to help us to make sure that around the globe we're countering the hard power of some countries with the power of our light and our soft power. We have been the envy of the world, where people see and know how special America is, because we live the value of every major religion, that we're going to love our neighbors, we're going to be there for you in your times of need. And we all know, with a terrorist group from far away to the most horrific attack, that in a lot of these countries, terrorist groups are trying to counter the democratic governments there. Look in the Sahel region. Look what's happening. When I was in Nigeria, I was shocked to say what they're talking about: instabilities in the north, the threats of terrorism in the north. I'm going to go for 7 more minutes and stop, but I want to use these last 7 minutes to return one more time to the people of my state and actually other states who demanded we do things different, who asked for help. Before I do, I just want to thank Mike Lee today. He's my partner in antitrust, a specialty of my friend Amy Klobuchar. And I don't know if you got my text, but you got it, where I said to you, I'm kind of going to the floor to hold it for as long as I can. And I may not make our first subcommittee together on antitrust, where we have a lot of common ground. So I'm sorry I missed it today. I know you'll fill me in, but I know my friend filled in. Thank you. So I want to close back where we started, about us, about why I'm here. I believe that there is an urgent crisis in our country that we are not talking about. It's not a left-right crisis, it's a right-wrong crisis. It's a moral moment, and again, in America, that's going to define our character, about who we are and what we stand for. There's a threat to the bedrock commitments we've made to each other as a country. People are threatening that bedrock commitment of Social Security. They're calling it a Ponzi scheme. They're making up absolute lies about it. When I read American after American who said that that is their lifeline, that told stories that if they don't get their Social Security payment or they get caught up because nobody's answering their calls, if the rural Social Security office, I read states, red and blue, where they're closing Social Security offices, if I now have to drive not 100 miles, but 150 miles at 93 years old, it doesn't quite make sense. One of my colleagues stood up here and said, that's already cutting benefits if you can't access the folks. I stood here because there's a threat to these bedrock commitments. The bedrock commitment we've made in healthcare in this country. We won the defense of the Affordable Care Act, but my colleagues know when you start talking about Medicaid, that's not 20 plus million Americans. It's 70, 80, 90 million Americans. It's our elders and nursing homes. It's our children with disabilities. It's our moms giving birth that are still giving birth in the country with about the highest maternal mortality rates in the industrial world. It's a moral moment. Who do we stand for? Like Schumer shocked me when he said they're going to use some kind of budget gimmick to push this through. He shocked me, Chuck. I thought this was going to come down to the parliamentarian, but it doesn't sound like it. Now it's just going to get done. With the math, and I read from Manhattan Institute criticized it on the right. AEI criticized it on the right. They said, what are you doing? What are you doing, America? You're going to rake up trillions and trillions of dollars in debt that our children and our children's children are going to have to pay for, passing the bucks that will grow. Are you doing that to help people get more access to health care, more access to retirement security, more access to the things we believe in, big ideas like universal child care, paid family leave? No, we're doing that in order to renew the tax cuts that I read conservative budget folks, moderate budget folks, all across the spectrum who said it will blow up our deficit. And the benefits of those tax cuts, not all, let's not use hyperbole, but most will go to the richest people in our country who I promise you, I celebrate people who've brought their ingenuity and their expertise and their grit and their tireless work who've built wealth in this country. Should not be us versus them, but I'm telling you that those folks do not need another tax cut. And the corporations who came here, you all remember, said we would like a 25% rate. The people I read said that when we kicked it to 21, not even what they were asking for from 35, it exploded. One of the main reasons it exploded our debt. And we read from conservative groups who just said all these promises that we would grow our way out of our deficit, they didn't materialize. All the promises that were made. Trump, for those who don't remember or weren't here when I read it, was going around telling folks that, oh, my tariffs, this is 2017, my tariffs, the money that I get, that will be what we could pay down the debt. The math that they did was that would account for about 1/750th of the debt at that time. But he used that money to try to compensate the farmers that he was hurting with his tariffs. This is a moral moment, and people are getting hurt, and people are afraid because of the threats to Medicaid cuts. There were people writing in and said $880 billion would devastate me, but even small cuts to services, my whole family, fragile architecture of our finances, if you just pull out the transportation money that my disabled child uses, that will crumble my financial world. And so when you talk about the bigger cuts, we know the math. Many states who expanded Medicare have a trigger that if it goes below 90%, all the Medicare expansion goes off in that state and millions of Americans will be hurt. That's not right, guys. That's not right. And so this is the choices we have before us. Our veterans and the VA. I'm mad at you now. You made me get very emotional with your story. We read John McCain's story. We read the stories of the poems of the unknown soldier looking over us and saying, what are you doing to the Gold Star families? What are you doing to the veterans? Are you living up to your promises that you made? Well, right now, with the cuts of tens of thousands, over 80,000 veterans who work for the VA, but even more, because about 20% or so of all federal workers are veterans. And we read stories from veterans in America who are shaken by what's happening, who are losing their jobs but yet all they want to do is serve. They're not what they're being called. They're not leeches. They're not criminals. They shouldn't be degraded for wanting to continue to serve their nation. This is what we're talking about, our veterans, our seniors, our health care, our financial security going forward. I asked the question to all those people who voted for Donald Trump, who believed in him that he would lower your grocery prices. I asked you, look at your financial self. Are you better off than you were 72 years ago financially? Well, the answer for most people who believed in him is no, because he didn't set out to do anything to lower prices. He set out to rename the Gulf of Mexico, to threaten Canada, to say I'm going to take over Greenland. He's done a lot of things, 140 executive orders. Many of them actually drive up your costs, make it more expensive to enroll in the ACA, reduce a lot of the tax credits there. He's increased your costs. He's taxed your bedrock services. Stock market tumbles, your 401k accounts are less. Inflation is up. Consumer confidence is down. This is what the voices we brought into this chamber, the voices of our constituents, red states, blue states, the voices of Democrats and Republicans, Republican governors, Democratic governors, we brought all the people that are saying, no, this is a moral moment, not left or right, right or wrong. And so I've tried over the last 25 hours and 1 minute to center the conversation back on what will we do of good conscience. People who are saying, I served this country, I risked my life, shouldn't be able to keep my job. People who are saying, this country once made itself the envy of the world because we invested in high quality education for every child. I don't like what's going on at the end of the Department of Education. People who are saying, I worked harder than I ever have, but the prices on everything in my life are getting higher. People who are saying that the America I learned about in school, the one where people's rights are protected, the people are saying that why are we yet again going through another healthcare battle that threatens millions of people, the people are saying that I'm worried about the financial security and the future of my country, the voices of folks. And so I end by saying simply this, where I started was John Lewis. I don't know how to solve this. I don't know how to stop us from going down this road. Chuck Schumer's now told me that they're greasing the skids to do these things. I'm sorry, but I know who does have the power. The people of the United States of America. The power of the people is greater than the people in power. It is time to heed the words of the man I began this whole thing with, John Lewis. I beg folks to take his example of his early days where he made himself determined to show his love for his country at a time the country didn't love him, to love this country so much, to be such a patriot that he endured beatings savagely on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, at lunch counters, on freedom rides. He said he had to do something. He would not normalize a moment like this. He would not just go along with business as usual. He wouldn't know how to solve it. But there's one thing that he would do that I hope we all can do that I think I did a little bit of tonight. He said for us to go out and cause some good trouble, necessary trouble, to redeem the soul of our nation. I want you to redeem the dream. Let's be bold in America, not to mean and degrade Americans, not divide us against each other. Let's be bolder in America with a vision that inspires, with hope that starts with the people of the United States of America. That's how this country started. We, the people. Let's get back to the ideals that others are threatening. Let's get back to our founding documents, that those imperfect geniuses had some very special words at the end of the Declaration of Independence. It was one of the greatest in all of humanity declarations of interdependence. When our founder said we must mutually pledge to each other, our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. We need that now. From all Americans. This is a moral moment. It's not left or right, it's right or wrong. Let's get in good trouble. My friend, Madam President, I yield the floor. Madam President, Madam President, thank you to the pages, thank you to the parliamentarian staff, thank you to the clerks, thank you to the doorkeepers. There are so many people that make this place special. I kept you up all night, kept you up 24 hours. I just want to say thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Madam President, Madam President,
Senator from Idaho.
Madam President, this next regular order of business, confirmation of Mr. Matthew Whitaker